Thank you for choosing CTN. And now, it's time with Herman and Sharron.
I love you. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a wonderful, intelligent, prolific writer with me today, and you're going to love this subject. But I got to get something off my chest, honey.
Oh, no.
I got to get something off my chest.
That's dangerous.
I know. I know I'm dating the show, so if you're watching this 5 years from now, just deal with it, okay? I may not even be here for 5 years, okay? At my age, you don't even buy green bananas. You've heard that before. But this was on the front cover of this liberal newspaper we've got in the local area, just puffing one of the worst debates. I watched the thing. It was the most pathetic,
You're right.
unbelievable interview. And anybody in today's society, I know a lot of you watching are Democrats. Have you read their platform? How in the world could you be a Democrat? Now, I know Republicans are bad, bad, bad. In fact, today's Republican are what used to be 15, 20 years ago Democrat. So that's how far we've moved. But goodness gracious, they're going socialistic, communistic, and the greatest president we've ever had in my lifetime was Ronald Reagan, and he fought communism, and now we've got it in the White House. And we're thinking about putting a female in that is a socialist. Unbelievable. But that was the worst interview I've ever seen in my life, and they're touting it.
I had no idea he was doing this, folks. But
that leads me to this interview today, because this guy knows what he's talking about. And I know I'm going to get lots of emails. Get ready for them, Linda. You are going to love them.
Yeah, she said I'm getting them, not you.
I know. She's pointing to her and saying, I'm going to get them. You know, but I almost said I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
No.
Because if you're a Democrat and you vote for that unbelievable, idiotic, stupid, communistic mind people, then you deserve what you get. And the guy we got in the White House, you did it twice. Twice.
Our guest is leaving now.
Anyway, yeah.
He's getting out of the, out of the area.
I'm telling you, you get to the point where you just go, I'm not believing this is America. And I never thought it could get to this place. I never thought in a million years that we'd ever be here. Be thou prepared. Boy, this book you need to get. There it is on your screen. And he's going to have a website on there. Go to that website, find out where he's speaking, where he happens to be, where he's going to be interviewed. You need to get this book because it is absolutely fabulous. In fact, Dave, go ahead and put up on the screen, and I'm going to have. Have you shown him yet?
No, you haven't even said his name yet.
I got so excited that we didn't even.
You want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, let me introduce him because I mean.
Make sure you mention that I'm a socialist Democrat. I don't think you knew that.
Well, I just want to let him know how much guts I've got with you sitting here. Okay?
That's right.
Okay, this is Carl Gallups. Is a former law enforcement officer. Turned senior pastor since 1987. He pastors Hickory Hammock Baptist Church in Milton, Florida. He is also the host of the international radio show Freedom Friday with host Carl Gallups, a member of the University of Mobile's Board of Regents, founder of the Internet PPN News and Ministry Network. This guy does everything. And commentator for WND. Thank you for being here. And
it's my honor.
How many books have you written?
This is my fourth.
Wow.
And the Lord has blessed them. All of them have become bestsellers. I'm very, very blessed.
You're qualified to be a writer.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On the screen, take a look at this. Follow this as Carl Gallups reads it. There it is right in front of you. It's on the screen.
Oh, you want me to read this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is an excerpt from my book. And it says, I wrote these words, so I know what it says. Yeah. Hitler's Germany in 1938 and the current path on which the United States of America is traveling. That's the last part of a sentence before it, so that didn't make much sense. But anyway, it says, see if any of the following situations sound familiar. Prayer was taken out of Germany's schools in 1935. Christmas and resurrection celebrations were forbidden in the schools.
See any familiarity here, folks?
Abortion became the new and expected normal. Selective gun registration was mandated, eventually followed by guns being confiscated by the Nazis. Free speech steadily faded. The media told only the pro-government side of a story. The Green Agenda, steeped in paganism, was eventually adopted. The church in Germany did not want to make waves or engage in controversy, so pulpits refused to address serious issues or politics. The German church was steered into mysticism like today's American pulpits that are okay with Christian yoga-type deceptions. Hitler knew this would make the church weak and ineffective. Most, but not all, churches in Germany were riddled with compromise. And then lastly, many German pastors wanted to be popular and find favor with the government. They certainly did not want to offend anyone. Political correctness was the rule of the day, in other words.
This might be a good spot, Dave, for me to read my little clip that I actually got out of I think it was the World magazine, it's a Christian magazine, but they have phenomenal articles. And so this would be number 10, Dave, on the screen. There it is. ESPN, you know, that's the sports network, suspended former pitcher Carl Schilling after an August 25th tweet comparing radical Muslims to Nazis. Superimposed with a red-tinted photo of Hitler, it read, only 5 to 10% of Muslims are extremists. In 1940, only 7% of Germans were Nazis. How'd that go? Now listen to this. ESPN didn't dispute Schilling's statistic because they're correct. They were correct, but called the tweet, get this, completely unacceptable. You don't want to mess with the Muslims. Don't want to mess with them. Mess with the Christians. I mean, just yesterday, our esteemed president condemned Christians again on a live feed from the White House. It's amazing. Muslims, no problem. He condemned Israel along with the Palestinians while the Palestinians are trying to kill Israelis as they walk the streets, even young children, stabbing them. But they're saying, Palestinians, stop that. Israelis, you stop what you're doing too. And I mean, even newscasters are taken back. They're going, wait a minute. They're attacking them. And you are giving them the same due as if the Israelis were doing the same thing the Palestinians are doing to the Israelis. It's absolutely amazing. But that's what's happening in America. And your book covers a lot of this.
It does. It covers that and dozens more topics and difficult questions that people ask. And I answer it from a biblical foundation, very balanced. So yeah, and people are finding it extremely useful.
Now, you bring up August 29th, 2005, the Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about a true story in there.
Yes. Yeah.
Share that.
Yeah, the book begins there. And the bottom line is, the reason I use that as an illustration, the first words of the book are, it happened once before, it can happen again. And I use that came from the mouth of a man who was in New Orleans when Katrina struck.
Yes.
And he had sent his family away to Texas, and he was going to stay and guard the home. The problem was, of course, the levees eventually broke, and the water came in, and hundreds of thousands of people were beginning to be displaced. People were dying. It was horrendous, and you remember all of that, and mass exodus from the city, and all the turmoil, crime, the looting. It was
there again, Democratic mayor.
Yeah, well, there you go.
It wasn't his fault.
Yeah, no.
He had 200 and some buses parked.
It was Bush's fault.
Yeah.
But the story illustrates this fact that in the middle of that disaster, and there is a natural disaster And there are all kind of man-made disasters that could come, but here's a natural disaster. In the midst of it, this man sets out to be a good Samaritan. And so he gets in a canoe that he had, and of course the floodwaters in the streets were turned into canals, and power lines down. How dangerous. Trees down, houses flooded.
I can see it again.
Oh, it was horrible.
We had 24 hours a day coverage.
Yes, and so he gets in his canoe and he goes down through the neighborhood looking, and in fact he's credited with saving 8 or 10 lives, and he starts bringing some people back into his own home. When he gets there, military government agents are in his home. They have commandeered it basically, and they arrest him and accuse him of being a looter. And he tries to tell them, this is my home, and they didn't believe him. They put him in a holding facility and in a jail. He wound up staying for months. His wife had given him up for dead because, communication was down. So she wasn't hearing from her husband. She was watching the news cycle, you were, and seeing all the death and destruction and mayhem, and they're telling people after weeks and weeks, if you've not heard from your loved ones, it could be bad. So she hadn't heard from him. Well, anyway, to get to the bottom line of the story, eventually he was released, eventually he was exonerated, but to this day, his wife has severe post-traumatic stress syndrome. He does. And so he lived in the midst of it. His guns were confiscated. I mean, horrendous. And that's in America. That's in New Orleans, Louisiana, one of the largest, most celebrated cities in our nation. And in the United States, that happened overnight. Guns were confiscated, people put in jail.
That's right.
And that's one of the topics of my book is, look, folks, we always need to be prepared.
It can happen overnight, can't it?
It can. It can.
Well, it's almost like America has changed since this character got in.
Yeah, well, it has. He said he was going to do that.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
He made it very clear.
And of course, everybody goes, which,
we thought the best.
I mean, I did too.
Yeah.
I mean, because, I love African American people. I do. I mean, ask her. I mean, she goes, okay, you're overboard, but I really do. So I wanted this guy to be everything that I wanted the first African American president. And then when I saw him absolutely turn into a communist.
Yeah, he's the most divisive president we've had in my lifetime, in my opinion. Yeah.
And I'm seeing that, and I'm going,
yes,
the dream that you have is gone.
Yes, I know. Well, guys, in writing this book, you introduced me a moment ago. I want your viewers to remember and understand. This is not, the title of it's Be Thou Prepared, Equipping the Church for Persecution and Times of Trouble. And I want people to know this is not some crazy prepper book. I'm not some wild-eyed prepper dressed in camouflage, eating grubs, hiding under a log in the woods. Right. I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a patriot, I'm a former law enforcement officer, I'm a pastor. 29 years I've pastored in one church, over 30 years in ministry.
That's a record.
And so, yes, I think so. It is for this church. But in over 40 years of life experience of dealing in the tragedies and traumas and disasters and death in people's life, the Lord's given me a lot of wisdom. And so people in this last decade or so, the last dozen years, people have really been inundating me with questions, important questions. Should we prepare? How do we prepare? I don't want to prepare too much. I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to look like some fanatic. On the other hand, should a Christian have a gun? Should churches have security teams? What about turn the other cheek? What about the martyrs? What do we do? Help us, Pastor. And so
what about all of that?
I've been answering. Well, it's all there.
Yes,
and we'll talk
right.
about anything you want. But I've been answering those questions down through the years. And people say, what should we prepare for? And I say to my folks, man, we live in Hurricane Alley. At least prepare for a hurricane. Yeah. I mean, Tornado Alley. I mean, but that doesn't even count the dangerous world we live in. Our borders are open like sieve. Our FBI says we have ISIS cells in all 50 states now. We've got this massive Islamic war in the Middle East, and Russia and China are now in Syria, which is extremely prophetic. We're living in prophetic times. I'm not a hand-wringer. I'm not a date setter. I'm not a sensationalist, but I tell people, wake up, church. Yeah. Look at the times in which we're living and be prepared. Now, the reason I tell people to be prepared, guys, is not so that we can hoard up something and go hide, but that if we're taken care of, if our family's taken care of, like the Bible says, the person that won't provide for their own family is worse than an unbeliever.
That's right.
Provide for your family. That means forethought and preparation. And then once that's done, when disaster strikes, guess what? You are then free to minister to the world around you in the name of Jesus Christ. Which I tell a story in here. that happened to me directly. I mean, this book comes out of my life and 40 years of experience, and I say to people, I know what I'm talking about. I've lived this stuff.
You know what got my attention was the article on the EMPs affecting our electrical grid.
Yes.
Now this is not conspiratorial.
No. There are congressional committees that discuss this weekly. EMP, for the sake of your viewing audience that might not know what that acronym means, it stands for Electromagnetic Pulse. Now, electromagnetic pulse scenarios, in the 1800s, the sun produced an electromagnetic pulse incident that there were no electronics back in those days, telegraph, but it absolutely decimated the telegraph system in the largest part of the world because of a solar flare incident. So even nature can provide EMP. Now think. But also another thing that can happen is now we know that EMP technology can be weaponized. Sure. You can burst a nuclear bomb in the atmosphere, not on the ground, over a nation, and it will fry everything that's electronic. It'll shut it down.
Including our cars.
Electric grid, cars,
all the electric
computers,
grid,
cell phones.
Everything. Hospitals, everything.
Yeah, because almost every car on the road now, with the exception of very few, have electronic components and computer components.
This station would go black.
Everything, it would. Radio would go black, station would go. So let's say you're riding down the interstate and you're out in some lonely stretch, maybe out in Florida in the swamps, on the interstate, or in Alabama, out on the stretch
and
between
now you're
miles
coasting.
of woods. And all of a sudden you're coasting and hundreds of cars around you are coasting and your cell phone doesn't work and nothing works and you get out of your car and it's a hot summer day and you're there. What are you going to do? Yeah. And so I talk about that in my book.
Your iPhone doesn't work.
That's right. Nothing works. I mean, except your feet. Yeah. But then people panic. And see, that's the other thing, civil disobedience. We watched it in Ferguson.
See, the thing of it is, if like we're talking about this,
yes,
the people that don't hear this kind of information, and when it happens, that's what creates panic.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Your next door, your sweet little next door neighbor, and this is a bit melodramatic, but it has happened. Your sweet little next door neighbor can turn into a killer if all of a sudden they don't have food and water. All of a sudden if they think, I'm going to die.
Oh, you're right.
And so that's another reason to be prepared, not only for you and your family, but think of others around you. The church needs to be prepared to minister to the community. Yes. Our church has done that. We've housed people in emergency disasters. We became a FEMA staging area for food and water in disasters. And we cooperate with other churches. We network with other churches.
Speaking of that, how would the church respond to this?
Respond to what?
What we were just talking about.
An EMP?
Yeah. I mean, and disasters and so, because it's coming.
Yes.
I mean, we get the idea. I think it's incorrect preaching, but we get the idea that nothing is going to happen to Americans.
Yeah.
We are going to be lifted out of here.
Yeah.
And we're just going to keep going. Yeah. And we're going to look back
singing
and say,
God Bless America.
And say, look at all the disaster that's going on.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
And it isn't going to work that way. I'm sorry, it ain't going to work that way.
And Herman and Sharron, the heresy of that, the tragedy of that kind of thinking is, what about our brothers and sisters in Iraq right now that are watching their wives and daughters raped and their children beheaded and their families decimated? Yeah. What about our brothers and sisters in North Korea by the tens
all
of
in
thousands?
The name of Allah.
In the name of Allah. In North Korea, in the name of atheism. They're in prison simply because they love Jesus. Yeah. China, millions of our brothers and sisters are worshiping underground because the government requires Christians to register. So I'm not saying that the great tribulation of the last 7 years has necessarily begun, but I am saying we are in tribulation. This world is in desperate tribulation. Our brothers and sisters.
We ain't seen nothing. I mean, look at how you woke up today.
Oh, yes.
Did you drive here or did you have a motel?
Well, I had a motel,
okay.
and then
okay. So you wake up, you got a nice motel.
I flew here, and I had an escort.
Breakfast, and you're brought to the station.
Coffee's there.
I mean, and we love you, and you're taken care of.
That's right.
But let me tell you, this ain't tribulation.
No, and this isn't how the rest of the world lives. Much of the rest of the world. And I tell people, just because Starbucks is open and an NFL game was on television last night, doesn't mean all is right with the world.
Exactly.
And America needs to wake up.
Yeah. Just turn your TV on and look at the next news conference, and you'll realize, you know what? This guy is taking us into that world of tribulation.
Yeah. A lot of Christians are beginning to get all of this now, and which is why I wrote the book, because now they have the questions.
I don't know if that's true, my friend.
I said a lot. I didn't say all. I said a lot.
When it comes to election time, watch.
Yeah, I know.
This is so pathetic. It's unbelievable.
I understand.
Senior adults are worried about, am I going to have my Social Security? I don't care what this guy believes. I don't care how many babies he kills. I don't care.
I'm entitled.
Is my Social Security going to be okay? That's all I want to know.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable.
I know. We live in an entitlement mentality as society. One of the huge things that I deal with in this book that goes to everything we're talking about is that so many believers in America, because for the last 50 years, we've been so blessed. I mean, we're the biggest economic engine in the world. We're the most powerful superpower in the world. We live in opulence and wealth, even the poorest of us, compared to third world countries.
Well, you bring out Christianity in Nero's time.
Yeah.
In the book.
Oh, I go all the way back to the early days. The early church had to learn.
It's like this has never happened. Talk about that story.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is that I go all the way back to the early church. I kind of begin there after I talk about the Katrina thing of just trying to wake up the church. Look, don't sit around and think this won't happen to us. It's already happened, and it's still happening.
Read your history.
All around us. I'm talking about in the United States. But then I go back to the early church, and I demonstrate that the early church had to learn how to deal with natural disasters, famine, earthquakes, disease, pestilences. They had to learn how to deal with people being persecuted for their faith. Most of the early church were Jews, and they were getting kicked out of their families and their businesses. That's why they were having to sell. In some churches, they were selling. People who were selling to and giving other people money because their lives were decimated.
Exactly right.
And then you move down through the years in the Roman Empire. Then government decreed by executive order from the Neros.
There you go. I heard that term before.
From the Caesars.
Executive order.
That's right. Literally, history records by executive order from the Caesars. Christians were persecuted. Tens and tens of thousands were put to death, thrown to the lions, burned alive. And so the early church had to deal with that. They had to deal with martyrdom. They had to deal with protection. And so one of the big things that I address in my book, Herman and Sharron, is that today in America, because we're so blessed, Christians will often say to me, well, you know, Brother Carl, I hear about all this preparation stuff, but you know, I'm just going to have faith. God's just going to take care of me. And my response to that...
Well, after all, he clothes the lilies, didn't he?
Well, that's right. That's right.
And he knows the sparrows when they fall.
That's right. And what I say is this. Of course we have faith in God. Of course we walk by faith and not by sight. We don't have a guarantee of another breath, another heartbeat. We don't have a guarantee of tomorrow. You can store up food and water and all that, which we should reasonably, but you can store it all up and your house can burn down. Or a tornado can scatter it 20 miles from you.
Or some guy comes, knocks on your door with a gun and says, I know you got food.
And you weren't prepared for that. So the bottom line is, of course, faith. But here's what I say to Christians. I'm just going to have faith. I'm not going to prepare. I say, okay, first of all, what do you do with the scripture that says, go to the ant, you sluggard? Even the ant. What do you do with the scripture that says, the wise man sees danger coming and prepares for it? The fool does not and pays the price. What do you do with the passage that says a person that does not provide for their own family is worse than an unbeliever?
And you're a slave to the lender.
Exactly.
If you're financing everything and paying for nothing, that's what happens.
And so I tell Christians, look, of course we live by faith, but listen to me. Do you have insurance, sir, ma'am? Do you have a spare tire in your trunk? Do you buckle your kids in before you take off on a trip? Do you brush your teeth? I mean, do you have an alarm system? Do you lock your doors? What are you doing? Our whole life is a life of preparation. Preparation for what? For the possibility of something going wrong.
We have 5 minutes left, but you got to tell this story about this converted Muslim. And he's in America. And he's driving. And two cars...
He's in Missouri.
Two cars pen him in. In traffic. And these people, these Muslims, jump out.
He was targeted.
Targeted because of what he wrote.
He was in St. Louis, Missouri.
Keep in mind, 5 minutes.
All right, St. Louis, Missouri. This is a 5-minute story. It's all in the book. But the bottom line is, he was converted from Islam to Christianity. And because he was a Christian, he began to see the Jews and Israel in a whole different light, the biblical light. And so he was writing on the internet some pro-Israeli stuff. And he became targeted by Muslims living in America who found out where he lived, where he traveled. They stalked him, and then they stopped him.
Living in America.
In Missouri, St. Louis. And in the middle of traffic at a stoplight, they came in upon him. They rushed his car. They came in. They took knives. They carved up his back. They threatened his life.
Let me tell you,
in America.
He says this in the book. He felt this going on his back, this design, like this. realizing afterwards with this sharp knife they had carved while he was bleeding, cutting his flesh, the Star of David.
In his back.
In his back.
Yes, yeah. So another point of my book is, look, Christians understand. Don't live in anxiety, but use your head, be prepared. We are being targeted now.
Did they ever find these animals that did that? Do you know anything about
I don't recall. I think I addressed that in my book, but I don't recall. But what I tell Christians, we're being targeted. Kim Davis, the flower shop owner, the Houston mayor, the pastors, we are being targeted.
Yes.
The radical gay agenda, the homosexual ruling, the Supreme Court, we're being targeted now. They admit that.
He was told by a friend several years ago, at least 5, 6 years ago, that this was coming.
15 years ago.
15 years ago?
I told my church 20 years ago this was coming.
He said, Herman, you know,
He's
you're in trouble.
He's
You're in trouble.
a liberal, but an honest liberal.
Yeah.
Okay, and he said, I know what you're headed for.
Yes.
He said, Herman.
Yes.
I fear for you.
And the reason you had me read this, I'm convinced, is because this is what Americans are beginning to see. We see these similarities. We know that we don't live under government decree to persecute us like other Christians do, but we see the progression or the digression.
What do we do? Because it's even on that list. What do you do with churches and Christians that says, I don't want to be involved?
Yeah, that's a cancer, that's a blight upon the churches. Pastors say it, Christians say it, and I say to them, you must be, you've got to stay engaged. God called us, Jesus said, you're the salt, you're the light. Well, guess what? To sprinkle salt, you're getting involved. To shine the light, you're getting involved. I tell my congregation all the time, the darker it gets, turn your light up. Yeah. Stay engaged, never grow weary of doing good. We have been raised up for such a time as this.
We have 2 minutes. That's your camera right there.
That's my
Share
camera.
Christ with somebody.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you so much for giving me this. And God bless you for watching today. And yes, the quickest way I can do this in 2 minutes is to refer to Romans 10:9 that said, if you would confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. And Romans 10:13 says, and whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord like this shall be saved. So I'm telling you, when it all comes down, at the very last moment you're drawing your breath, nothing in this world's going to matter. The only thing that will matter is your relationship with the God that created you. And he has created a way for you to be restored with him through the blood of Jesus Christ. I beg you, if you're not saved, if you haven't given your life to the Lord, if you're not born again, today is the day of your salvation. That's why God put you in tune to this program today.
Amen. That's key.
Yes.
Today. Do you realize what today is all about? I mean, you cannot repeat this day ever again. It's gone. Once it's over, it's over. So wherever you're watching this, as Carl said, today is the day of salvation.
Yes.
I just heard a story recently that this individual was led to Christ, and the next day they read in the paper the individual that was led to Christ was in a horrible car accident and died. Now you may be watching and saying, what are you trying to do, scare somebody? No, that's just the way life happens. I mean, you may live another 50 years that are watching right now and say, okay, well, what does that have to do? You said today and I need to do it right now. All I'm saying is you have no assurance that you're going to breathe in the next 10 seconds. Trust Christ.
Yes.
He is your answer.
Yes.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching It's Time. If you have recently made a decision for Christ, Herman and Sharron would like to hear from you.